Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation on addressing team conflict, 3 keys to facilitating difficult conversations. My name is David Witt. I'll be your host today. I'm speaking to you from the Ken Blanchard Company's headquarters in San Diego, California. In just a little bit, I'll be introducing our subject matter expert, best-selling author Craig Weber. Craig is the author of Conversational Capacity and Influence in Action. The focus of today's webinar is to talk about team performance in today's organizations. All of you in the L&D space know that there are advantages to high-performing teams. We know that when they're operating at their highest level, they improve collaboration among people, they help people and organizations achieve superior results, and when they're done right, they can increase innovation in your organization. The bad news, though, is that work teams fail more than half the time. The Ken Blanchard Companies recently did research in conjunction with Training Magazine. We polled over 500 leadership, learning, and talent development professionals, and we found 2 important results. One, teams are suffering. Only 27% of people think that their teams are high performing, and a full 73% say we're not getting the most out of the teams that we're participating in. And then even more important to an L&D professional is only 1 in 4 people think that their organization does a good job of teaching people how to perform well in teams, both at the leader level and at the team member level. In today's presentation, we're going to get a chance to hear from Craig Weber, the best-selling author of Conversational Capacity, The Secret to Building Successful Teams That Perform When the Pressure's On, and Craig's newest book, Influence in Action, How to Build Your Conversational Capacity, Do Meaningful Work, and Make a Powerful Difference. Before I bring Craig on, though, I want to talk a little bit about the agenda that we'll be covering in today's session, and then also setting up a little bit of background for those of you that may not be familiar with the Ken Blanchard Company's approach to building high-performing teams. The first thing we're going to talk about today is the 4 stages of team development. Now, a lot of you might know this as forming, storming, norming, and performing. With Blanchard, we use the labels for each of those stages of team development: orientation, for when a team is first starting out; dissatisfaction, which always occurs as the team kind of gets a feel for how are we going to work together. There's usually, of course, dissatisfaction. It's not going as quickly as people hoped. Teams, though, with proper guidance and training can move into the 3rd stage, which is integration, and then finally onto the 4th stage, which is high-performance production. In the second part of our presentation today, we're going to talk about how to facilitate productive conversations at stage 2, that all-important dissatisfaction stage, when conflict arises and people have a hard time communicating through their issues. And then we're going to get a chance to hear from Craig Weber about these new concepts of candor and curiosity, how that can help you at stage 2, but more importantly, how you can bring the concepts of candor and curiosity alive in your organization. Let me go ahead and just take a minute and share with you those 4 predictable stages that all teams go through on the way to high performance, and how the Ken Blanchard Companies approaches them. On this slide, you're getting a chance to see those 4 stages, reading from right to left in this case. When we look at that red space, we're looking at Team Development Stage 1. We abbreviate it as T1. And there's that orientation stage of team development. Now, there's 2 things that you can use to kind of diagnose where your teams are currently at. You can use productivity measures and morale measures. Take a look at the dotted line. That's the morale measure. And you can see that when a team is first starting out at team development level stage 1, morale is high. People are excited about the possibility of what this team could be, what they might achieve. Take a look at the productivity though. The team's never done this work before. No one's had any experience with it. There's actually nothing coming out of the door from the team, so productivity is low. When you've got a combination of high morale and low productivity, you've got a team that's definitely at team development stage 1. Take a look moving over to the left a little bit. In the orange, you're seeing that stage 2 dissatisfaction. And here you can see the main thing that's happened, a huge dip in morale. Now the team's gone from feeling good about the prospects of the team to really thinking, I don't know if we're going to make it. And maybe this was a bad idea to be on this team. That always happens when the work's kind of found to be harder than folks thought it would be at the beginning. And there's an opportunity for a lot of infighting at this stage. Take a look at productivity. Even though the morale's gone down, the team's actually generally producing a little bit more than they are at that first stage. With proper guidance, and we're going to be talking about that in depth, when a leader can help the team communicate during conflict, the team can move to development stage 3, which is integration. And here you can see that morale is starting to improve again. You can see that productivity is continuing to climb. And if the leader can help the team build team cohesion, they can move into that final stage 4. That's our goal. High performance, team development stage 4 production is what we're looking for. Here's a little bit more in-depth descriptor of what each of these stages looks like. One of the things that I love here is to look at that third bullet. I think that's the fastest way to kind of sort through and figure out where your team is at. You can see the third bullet in stage 1, the team's enthusiastic and excited. Third bullet at stage 2, the team is frustrated and confused. Third bullet at stage 3, the team is guardedly optimistic with variable trust and respect. That's important. And then at stage 4, take a look at the third bullet, the team is unified and trustful. And that's where they actually achieve this sustaining high performance. The 4 essential team leadership skills that match up with each of these stages of team development are here on the slide that we're looking at now. If you take a look at the colored section in the center of the slide, you'll see 4 words that describe what a leader needs to provide to the team because it can't provide it for itself. At team development stage 1, the team needs structuring from the leader. And if you take a look there on the right-hand side, you'll see that structuring includes setting the context for the team's work, orienting the team members to one another, providing structure, developing a team charter, establishing boundaries. In stage 2, the team leader's role is resolving, and that's about addressing and leveraging conflict. That's about encouraging candor and curiosity that we're going to learn about in some detail. It's being able to provide feedback on progress and ensure that everyone's voice is heard. And Craig's going to help us with understanding how we can do that in the teams that we lead or the teams that we're a part of. The leader's role in stage 3 is supporting, and now they're encouraging participation and inclusion, they're cultivating trust, they're recognizing contributions, and they're fostering team accountability. And then the leader's role in team development stage 4 is validating. And here's where they're encouraging creativity, agility, risk-taking, they're recognizing and celebrating the team. There, as the leader, are relinquishing control, letting other people step into a leadership role, and then helping the team apply lessons learned to new challenges. The key concept through all of this is leaders must match the team's development level. Just in the same way in Blanchard's SL2 model, a leader needs to adjust the amount of direction and support they provide based on where the individual is at, a team leader needs to do the same. They need to be keenly aware of where their team is at and then apply the right style. Never is that more important than when a team is at stage 2, when people have a hard time communicating through their issues. At stage 2, conflict always occurs, and conflict can be debilitating if team leaders and team members don't know how to deal with it. This is where a team is in this fight or flight mode, and Craig's going to tell us more about that. Individuals will often withdraw. People will feel there's no way to move forward, and there is definitely a lack of candor and openness. I'm so excited to introduce and bring to the presentation now Craig Weber, the author of Conversational Capacity and Influence in action. And Craig, thank you so much for being here with us today to take us on this deeper look on what we can do when a team is at stage 2.
Thank you very much for having me to talk about this, David. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's good to have you here with us, Craig.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you're absolutely right. Conflict is inevitable in teamwork. And I think a lot of people think of conflict as a negative thing. But I think, in fact, conflict is neutral. It's how we approach it that determines whether it's something useful or something that's not, something that's constructive or something that's destructive. And if we're going to embrace conflict and use it to improve the way our teams perform, there's this core competence we need to cultivate, conversational capacity. And so I appreciate the time to talk a little bit about what is conversational capacity and why does it matter, particularly in that dissatisfaction phase where conflict tends to be at its highest in teamwork. And so if you think about it, conversational capacity is sort of a pivotal competence. So high conversational capacity and conflict is actually a source of learning and strength. Low conversational capacity and that same conflict is a source of dysfunction and weakness. So it's a pivotal competence in that sense. And it begs the question, what do we mean by conversational capacity? And so let's define it. And I would define it first off as the ability, and this can be of an individual or an entire team of people, to have constructive, learning-focused dialogue under pressure. So you want people to be constructive, learning-focused, engaged in a highly productive, balanced way in situations where that really matters. And this is easy to see in a team of people. High conversational capacity, for example, and a team can put its most difficult, conflict-laden, challenging issue on the table and do really good work around it, where low conversational capacity and a team will often see its performance derailed by a minor difference of opinion. So you can have a lot of smart people around the table, a great product or service, a killer strategy in place, all the resources your team or your business needs at its disposal. But if the conversational capacity of the team is too low, it is going to underperform. So again, in this sense, it's sort of a linchpin competence, but it's often not something we're paying as much attention to as team members or particularly as team leaders. And so my work, and fortunately I have the privilege of partnering with the Blanchard company, is to help change that, to get people paying attention to this piece of the puzzle. So constructive and learning-focused dialogue where it counts. There's a second way of thinking about it, and you can see it in the second bullet point. It's that ability to remain both candid and curious under pressure. And so to talk a little bit more about this way of framing the process, I'm going to jump to the next slide and talk about something I refer to as the sweet spot in a conversation or a meeting. And the sweet spot, again, is that place where both candor and curiosity are in balance. And the conversations are honest, they're open, they're forthright, they're direct. You're not wondering what people around the table are thinking about the issue because the candor is extremely robust. It needs to be. But as we've all seen in life, unadulterated candor isn't always a good thing. There's a lot of that going around these days, unfortunately. So in the sweet spot, that candor is balanced with lots of curiosity. People are open-minded. They're inquisitive. They're eager to learn. When you disagree with me strongly in a meeting, David, I don't get defensive. I get interested. Wow, I love my idea. It makes perfect sense from where I'm sitting, and David doesn't like it at all. That's interesting. What's he picking up on here? Am I missing something? That is where the good work gets done, when we're able to maintain that balance between candor and curiosity. And when we trigger out of the sweet spot, whether it's as individuals or as entire teams, it's usually because we've let go of one pole or the other. And I can give you a dozen examples off the top of my head where I really should have been in that sweet spot at some point in life, and I left it because I dropped candor. And now the problem is I'm overly guarded and cautious. I'm sitting in a meeting seeing a big risk, and I'm not saying anything. I'm sitting there with a dumb grin on my face, not speaking up. I could also give you a lot of other examples in life, both personally and professionally, where I should have been in that sweet spot, and yet I left it because I dropped curiosity. And now the problem is I'm arrogant and argumentative. The farther I get out of the sweet spot this direction, the less curious I'm being, the less open-minded, the less learning-focused. The basic problem, if you really think about it, is that my mind is shut, but my mouth is open. That's never a good look. And so we could define the sweet spot, again, conversation capacity, as that ability to stay in the sweet spot, both candid and curious under pressure. And the trick becomes, how do we cultivate this ability ourselves as individuals? It'll be hard for us to help our team stay in the sweet spot if we can't do it. But then how do we also build this into our teams? So we're better than other teams at working through difficult problems or challenging circumstances because we have this more mindful, disciplined approach to staying in that sweet spot when it really matters. That's sort of the core idea here in terms of the sweet spot. So that may sound nice, and you may be thinking, okay, great, candid and curious under pressure. That's not that complicated. Thank you. The problem is it's very simple in concept. I'll give you that. The challenge is it's very difficult to hold this balance under pressure for a rather daunting reason. To basic degree, human nature works against us here. There are two powerful emotional reactions we all inherited at birth, and under pressure, it's these emotional reactions that tend to throw us out of the sweet spot. And so we're going to talk about these two reactions. One you can see here I refer to as the need to minimize, and the other is the need to win. And so we're going to take these one at a time and talk about them. And to illustrate the need to minimize, let me give you a quick example. I start my first book with this story, and I use it a lot in my workshops. When I was a young kid, I had a good friend who lived down the street from me, and he was an epileptic. And one day on the playground at recess, my friend fell down and had a violent seizure. And I went running over to help my friend with the clearest intentions in the world. Get down on my hands and knees and help him out and speak up to a group of kids who are making fun of him. He can't protect himself. I need to. And with those very clear intentions, I ran to the scene and I froze in my tracks. And that was deeply disturbing to me as a kid. I couldn't explain that to myself. Whereas now in life, I realize what happened. It turns out help out and speak up were not the only intentions in my head that day. There was a deeper set of intentions, things that were actually really important to me, but I wasn't as conscious of those. While one part of my mind was saying help out and speak up, another part of my mind was saying, in essence, watch out and shut up. Don't become the one they're making fun of. Don't risk your social standing. Don't get beat up. And what happened on the playground is that, you need to watch out and shut up, won out. And so you could say what happened is my good intentions were overwhelmed by a need to minimize the level of negative emotion, tension, discomfort, or risk in the situation. And I had good intentions, but I couldn't act on them because my need to minimize overwhelmed them. And this isn't just a problem with kids on the playground. We see nurses in surgical teams not speaking up when they see the doctor making a mistake. We see co-pilots on aircraft not speaking up when the pilot's making an error. So this is a fairly strong tendency because it's the conversational manifestation of the flight response. And its ability to pull us off balance in a tough conversation should not be underappreciated. And suddenly people in meetings are covering up their views, they're watering down their point, they're bringing stuff up in the hallway rather than in the meeting. They're feigning agreement, they're using email to provide feedback rather than a face-to-face conversation. And all these behaviors, we sacrifice progress and effectiveness for comfort and safety. And if that was the only tendency making it difficult for us in teams to get through this dissatisfaction phase and manage conflict in a better way, we'd have our work cut out for us. But unfortunately, that's not the only tendency. There's this other tendency, the need to win. And I worked with a team a number of years ago that was quite dysfunctional, and on that team was a gentleman named Doug, and Doug was no doubt the smartest person on the team, just a brilliant guy. But the smartest guy on the team actually made the team dumber because the way he wielded his smarts pushed everyone else away from the table. He was loud, he was brash, he dismissed people's views when he didn't like them, he would make snarky comments and roll his eyes. And so a lot of other really smart people around the table began to minimize because of the way he behaved. And Doug was being triggered in a lot of meetings, not by the need to minimize, but by this need to win, to be right, to get his way, to sell his view to the group. And when our need to win gets triggered, curiosity tends to be the first casualty. We leave the sweet spot the other direction. And the behavior pattern is very different. We're argumentative. We don't listen. We dismiss people we don't agree with. We pull in allies to bolster our view. We can pull rank. There's a range of these behaviors. We tend to put our view on the table as if it's a fact. So when our need to win triggers, we tend to leave the sweet spot and behave in a way that sacrifices progress and effectiveness to get our way, to be right, to get people to adopt our view and run with it. And the impact on our ability to manage conflict in a team is dramatic. To push a lot of smart people away from the table. Often two people with two win tendencies will start arguing in a meeting while everyone else is shutting down. And so part of the challenge to build our conversational capacity and that of our teams is to learn to better recognize very quickly when our need to minimize or our need to win is pulling us off balance, and to learn to act more intentionally despite them. So it's not that we get rid of these tendencies. That's not possible. But we can learn to recognize these tendencies and make more conscious choices about how to respond. And so that takes some work. And if we're going to do that, we're going to build our conversational capacity, the discipline to stay in that sweet spot, there are three key things we need to cultivate. One is we need to increase our awareness. We need to recognize when these emotional reactions are throwing us and others off balance. There's also a mindset we need to adopt, a new way of thinking, a conversational North Star, you can say, so that even when our need to minimize or win is throwing us off balance, we stay focused on what matters. And then what's nice about this discipline is there's actual skills, things we can teach people, things we can learn ourselves, things we can practice and get better at. So we're increasingly able to align our behavior with this mindset. And so the mindset is comprised of, we'll bounce back one more. The mindset is comprised of learning, getting smarter, and thinking more clearly. So learning is sort of the key value in this mindset, because our primary objective in a tough conversation isn't to avoid conflict. It isn't to argue about conflict. It's to learn from it. We're trying to help whoever's making a decision make the wisest decision they can. And so in order to think more clearly and make wise choices and learn, we pool different perspectives. We explore and dive into people with views that differ from our own, because that's where the aha moment tends to come from. We're actually looking for people who see things differently. If I've got a finance background, for example, I might look at how the sales team thinks about the issue. Or if I've got an engineering background, I might wonder what the operations person thinks about the decision. It can also be things like personality. I may have a slightly more critical, pessimistic personality, so I may want to lean into the optimist to see how they feel about the decision. So I'm always looking for who in this room might see things differently than I do, and I want to explore and understand how they're looking at the issue, not because it'll make me comfortable or right, but because it'll help me think more clearly and perhaps help us make a better decision. So this notion of exploring diverse perspectives in the pursuit of learning is sort of the conversational North Star. And so we've got to learn to rein in our need to minimize or our need to win, because the farther we let ourselves get out of the sweet spot, the less capable we are of learning from people who see the world differently. We don't learn much from people if we're avoiding our differences, after all, and we don't learn much from people if we're arguing over them. And so that ability to maintain candor and curiosity under pressure dramatically improves our ability to learn from people who see the world differently. And if that's the mindset, there are actually some skills we can employ for putting that into practice. So we move to the next chart here. There are actually 4 skills, 2 candor skills and 2 curiosity skills that can help us stay in the sweet spot. And when my need to minimize is triggered in a meeting, I focus on the candor skills, because that's what tends to help me stay candid and not let my minimizing reactions water that down. For someone like Doug, when his need to win, to be right triggers, what he focuses on is the curiosity skills, because normally when his need to win triggers, curiosity gives way. So those candor skills allow him to behave in a way that keeps him in balance. And so there's 2 candor skills here. We'll start there. And one is we clearly state our position on the issue. And what I mean by this skill is it's the ability to state where you're at on the issue in one sentence, no more than 2. It's like a topic sentence in good paragraph construction. I think X. So someone in a meeting might say, I think we should hold off on another acquisition for at least 6 more months. That is a very clear position. And so we want to anchor our point of view with a clear position to let people know where we currently stand. But that's not quite enough. There's a second skill, and it's very similar to doing long division homework for many of us in elementary school, where our teacher didn't just allow us to show up the next morning with our answers. We were required to show our work. And so in the second skill, we don't just state our position. We take responsibility for that position by explaining the thinking behind it. In essence, with these 2 candor skills, we're saying, here's where I'm at on the issue. Let me show you how I got there. Or here's what I think makes sense. Let me show you why. And I've always liked the psychologist Steven Pinker once said, language is a magnificent faculty we use to get ideas out of one head into another. These 2 candor skills are a way to streamline that process. If I'm trying to get an idea out of my head, through my mouth, and into a conversation or meeting, putting out where I'm at on the issue and showing people how I got there is a way to do that in a fairly accessible and rigorous way. And so those are the 2 candor skills. Now, if we stop there, We might have a more rigorous argument or a more structured debate, but we haven't quite elevated the conversation to collaborative learning and really leaning into difference to leverage conflict to make better decisions. So this next skill is really key. And as we jump to the curiosity side of the table, we're going to show people how we're holding our current perspective. And in this discipline, we're skeptical of our own thinking. We're always wondering, what are other people seeing that I'm missing? Do I have a blind spot here? Is there a problem with my analysis? And so in essence, we're trying to treat our views less like truths and more like hypotheses. And to do this, we test it. We actually ask people to help us identify where our thinking may be in trouble, where there may be a blind spot, where we're missing some evidence, or perhaps where we're making an erroneous assumption. And so there's a lot of tests we can employ, some casual, some more robust. If I'm talking to a really close colleague, a casual test might suffice. I might put my view on the table and explain it, and then say, David, you see things differently than I do. What's your take on this? But if I'm the boss and I'm talking to someone new on my team who might be more prone to minimize because they're new and they're talking to the boss, my testing may need to be more vigorous. I've said what I think and why I think it. Now I'd like to hear from others, especially those who disagree with me. Or right now, I feel like my idea makes perfect sense. That scares me. How are you looking at this? What do you think about the issue? And so a good test signals an openness to disconfirming views, ideas, and information. Again, we're treating our views of reality more hypothetically and a little less rigidly, which I think is the hallmark of an agile thinker. Now, that would get us a long way in terms of pulling other people's views and leaning into difference. But you can imagine being in a meeting where you do this well. You put your view on the table, you explain it, and you test it. And someone at around the table fires back and says, there's no way that'll work. What you don't want to do there is shut down and minimize. Oh, okay, sorry. Or what you don't want to do there is trigger the other direction and go to win. Yes, it will work. I'm going to say it again. Try to listen this time. Neither of those two reactions plays what's missing. What's missing is their thinking. Where are they coming from? So that second curiosity skill is really key. We inquire into the views of other people. We actively seek to understand how other people are looking at the issue. So what you might say in that meeting is, look, I appreciate your candor. You don't think this is going to work. Take a couple of minutes and help me understand why you see it that way. Can you give me an example? Where are you coming from? I don't need to agree with their assessment, but I certainly want to work to understand it. And so one person asking a few questions can make a big difference in a meeting, because if someone's not participating in the meeting, they can use inquiry to invite that person in. If someone's put their view on the table but they haven't explained it well, I could use inquiry to invite more of their thinking on the table. So one person with a few really good inquiries in a meeting can have a profound impact on the quality of the learning and change conflict from a problem to an opportunity, from an obstacle to learning to a facilitator of learning. So it's a powerful skill. And so those are the 4 skills. That's a quick whirlwind tour. There's a lot in each of these skills to learn, but that's the basics. And just as I begin to wrap up here, the way to think about conversational capacity is it's a conversational martial art. And I know there's a risk in framing it that way, because some people might start thinking, this is great. I'm going to use this against my colleagues tomorrow. But in this conversational martial art, our opponent isn't the other person we're talking to. It's not the issue we're trying to address, or even the context in which all that's unfolding. That's just the mat on which the contest takes place. In this martial art, if we're going to stay in the sweet spot, focused on learning, our opponent is always our ego. And so I like that. If we're going to stay in the sweet spot, focused on learning and doing good work under pressure, we have to learn to take our egos to the mat. And I think if we want to become better leaders and we want to run better teams, we have to become better human beings, less driven by our emotional reactions and our egos, and more driven by the better angels of our nature, candor, curiosity, and purpose. What's the purpose of the meeting? What are we trying to accomplish here? How do I help this team move to a higher level of performance? So another way to think about this is that any organization, any team, is really a community of discourse. And leadership is about shaping the nature of the discourse. Anyone can do that. And someone exercising real leadership is shaping the discourse in the direction of learning, progress, and growth. And so that's kind of a high-level overview of conversational capacity, David. I hope that's helpful.
Craig, that was wonderful. I love that model so much, and I really feel now I've got a way when we or on a team, when I'm on a team and it's in that stage 2 dissatisfaction, the use of candor and curiosity will help me to move forward from it. I also love your idea of knowing it's one thing, doing it's another. I was just in a strategy meeting yesterday, and I really wanted to make a point. I was like, oh, my gosh, I'm not exhibiting either candor or curiosity. I'm just wanting to say what I want to say. So I love your idea, which is learn the concepts, be self-aware, but then go further and actually learn to develop the skills to make these a part of your conversational capacity.
Well said. Yeah, and that's, I think, why we refer to it as a discipline. It's not a gimmick. This takes work, but the upside is it really does work. There's that awareness, the mindset, and the skill set. And if you're willing to put some effort into cultivating all three, you can see profound impact on the performance of not just your own behavior, but that of your team.
Well, Craig, thank you so much. As we begin to wrap up, one of the things that we want to share with everyone, why we're so excited about this methodology that Craig Weber has brought into Blanchard's team leadership program, is it now we've got a way to teach managers how to manage conflict. And you can see that one of the things that the Blanchard team leadership program is designed to do is teach leaders how to not only manage conflict, but provide clarity and build trust to successfully grow and maintain high-performance teams. In the Blanchard team leadership program, leaders learn how to keep the team aligned. They learn how to monitor progress and provide feedback, create a safe environment, at the same time holding team members accountable and developing the skill to monitor ongoing team dynamics. The program is offered in a number of different ways. It's offered as a one-day live in-person workshop, but it's also available in a virtual format of 3 two-hour sessions. And then it's available also on-demand e-learning in a Team Leadership Online. That's 35 minutes of the essentials of what Craig and I have talked about today. And then finally, the Blanchard Team Leadership Program provides you with an on-demand tool, including a team leadership app, so that you can access materials after the training and continue to learn how to master and develop those skills. Here's a quick look at the facilitator materials that come with the team leadership program. One of the things we're especially excited about, it's a self-study process and no training for trainers is required. The facilitator materials include training designs, the leader notes, the PowerPoint slides, and we're very excited. Ken Blanchard Companies is located in San Diego. We're just 90 minutes south of a place where they really know how to make wonderful videos and films, Hollywood, California. And one of the things you'll find with the videos that have been built into the team leadership program, not your run-of-the-mill training programs, wonderful actors bringing these concepts alive. And, of course, the team leadership program and the materials can be accessed through the Blanchard Exchange site. That's your resource for follow-up after the training concludes. Here's a quick look at the participant materials. There is, in a launch phase, the preview video, team assessment, a way to discover the team leadership online, and also access to that team leadership app. Learning and practice is a key part of all Blanchard programs. That includes 3 key pieces in this program: the workbook, the at-a-glance booklet, which is kind of an executive overview, kind of your quick reference guide, and then your high-performance team's roadmap to keep these concepts in front of you. And finally, as a part of that master phase, you've got the team assessment report where team members can assess where do we think our team is at, a great way to open up dialogue, and also 2 important things that you'll want to use at the beginning of a team being brought together, the team charter worksheet. This is where you decide what our norms and what our clarity and how we're going to make decisions, and then also that team dynamics observation worksheet. All the Blanchard's programs include a 4-step process, which is launch. This is where you do things before you come to class. Learn. It's where you learn the concepts. Practice, which we've talked about to turn what you know into skills. And then finally master, so that you really get good at it. We're excited about the program. We're very excited about the new methodology that Craig Weber has brought into the team leadership program. If you're ready to get started and have your teams have a leader who can provide clarity, manage conflict, and build trust, we know your organization will see superior results. If you're ready to develop your team leaders, the Ken Blanchard companies would love to be with you to partner and take this into your organization. Craig, thank you so much for being here with us today and taking us through this content and sharing that methodology that you've got in your books, Conversational Capacity and Influence in Action. It's been a real pleasure to have you with us here today.
Well, thank you very much, David. As I said before, I genuinely appreciate the opportunity, so thanks for the invitation.
You're welcome, and thanks to all of you for joining us for this look inside Blanchard's new team leadership program and how you can bring out the best in your teams. That does conclude today's session. We hope you'll join us again at another Blanchard event in the near future. Bye, everyone.